Dark wood is back. Chrome is back. Color is back. And it's not random. It's a correction to something design got wrong for the last 10 years. Here's why the 90s are actually making sense again. For most of the last decade, homes were optimized for one thing above all else: how they photographed. Grayish walls, matching neutral furniture, surfaces cleared of anything that suggested a person actually lived there. This was the dominant look, and it wasn't accidental. It was built for a platform, tuned to perform well in a square photo grid, and it worked exactly as intended for years. What it didn't do was feel like home. A decade of rooms designed to look calm from a screen produced a quiet, widespread fatigue with rooms that felt sterile in person, technically correct, emotionally flat. The 90s comeback isn't really about the 90s specifically. It's about anything that isn't that. The decade just happens to be the most available alternative, dense with color, texture, and personality exactly where the last 10 years had none. Design nostalgia tends to resurface on a roughly 20 to 30-year cycle, and this isn't a coincidence. It follows the people who have the income and the appetite to redesign their homes at any given moment. The generation that grew up inside 90s interiors is now the generation with the buying power to recreate the feeling of those rooms, deliberately or not. This is the same mechanism that brought 1970s design back in the 2010s and 1960s design back right now alongside it. Nostalgia in design isn't really about the decade being objectively good. It's about which decade the people currently furnishing homes were children in, because that's the version of comfort their memory defaults to, whether they consciously intend it or not. What makes this cycle predictable rather than random is that it's tied to a fixed, measurable interval, roughly the time it takes a child to become a homeowner with disposable income. That means the next cycle is already forecastable decades in advance, simply by tracking who's currently young enough to be forming those memories. The 90s aren't back because the decade was special. They're back because the math finally lined up. There's a term designers have started using for what's actually happening in homes right now, and it isn't 90s revival, it's cozymaxing. Rooms are being layered deliberately. More texture, more furniture, more evidence of daily life, in direct opposition to the pared-down minimalism that dominated the previous decade. The 90s aesthetic simply happens to be an extremely convenient vocabulary for cozymaxing, because 90s interiors were already built around exactly this instinct. Oversized furniture, layered fabric, rooms that prioritized comfort over composition. Designers aren't reaching backward because the decade itself is magic. They're reaching backward because it's the most recent era that already solved the problem they're currently trying to solve. This distinction matters because it changes what actually needs to be replicated. Cozymaxing isn't asking anyone to recreate a literal 90s room. Beige carpet, specific wallpaper, exact furniture models. It's borrowing a principle: layer more, restrain less. Let a room show evidence of the life happening in it. The decade is a reference point, not a blueprint. And that's precisely why the trend has room to keep evolving past a simple costume of the past. Gray and grayish dominated for so long that they stopped feeling like a design decision and started feeling like the default, the color you picked when you weren't sure what else to pick. That kind of dominance rarely lasts, because a color palette that becomes the safe, default option eventually starts reading as an absence of decision-making rather than a decision itself. Hunter green, burgundy, mustard, teal, 90s color is returning specifically because it demanded commitment. A saturated wall color is a visible choice in a way that greige never was. And after a decade of rooms that avoided visible choices, a room willing to make one again reads as confident rather than dated. The color didn't change. What changed is what confidence looks like now. There's also a resale value logic that kept gray in place far longer than taste alone would have. Neutral colors were considered safer for buyers, easier to sell, less risky for anyone renovating with resale in mind. Part of what's shifting now is a willingness to prioritize how a home feels to live in over how easily it might sell to a stranger later, and saturated color is one of the clearest signals of that shift in priority. Underneath the color and the nostalgia, there's a quieter, more practical reason 90s design is resurfacing. The materials were often simply better made. Solid dark wood furniture, real chrome hardware, glass block that required actual skill to install correctly. These were choices that assumed longevity, at a time before flat-pack furniture became the default assumption for how most people would furnish a home. Bringing these materials back isn't purely aesthetic. It's a response to a decade of furniture built to be replaced rather than kept, and a growing preference for rooms built around pieces that were made to last. The 90s look carries an implicit argument about durability that the design itself doesn't have to state out loud. The materials make the case on their own. This is also why secondhand 90s furniture has become genuinely desirable rather than merely tolerated. A solid wood dresser from that era, found used, is often better constructed than a new equivalent bought today. The revival isn't just referencing the look of durable furniture. In many homes, it's literally furnished with the original, decades-old pieces themselves, still functioning exactly as they were built to. Everyone furnishing a home right now has spent more of their daily life inside a screen than any generation before them, in rooms that feel tactile, textured, and unmistakably physical read as a relief from that, whether or not the person choosing them could articulate it that way. The 90s, as a design reference point, predates the era when every surface in a home started competing for a phone's attention. This is part of why chrome, glass block, and heavy textiles are returning at the exact moment digital life has become inescapable. These materials don't photograph as cleanly as minimalist rooms did. They're not optimized for a screen. And that's increasingly the point. A room that resists looking good on a phone is, in a small way, a room built for the person actually standing in it. Texture plays a specific role in this that's easy to underestimate. A heavily textured room simply demands more from the senses than a smooth, flat one does. Running a hand across a chunky knit throw or a rough chrome edge registers differently than looking at a photo of the same object ever could. In a life increasingly mediated through a screen, that sensory demand isn't incidental. It may be the entire appeal. The last decade of interior design was shaped heavily by what performed well on social platforms, and performing well tends to reward sameness. The same neutral palette, the same handful of furniture silhouettes, repeated across thousands of homes until rooms in different countries started looking interchangeable. Individuality was quietly optimized out of a lot of interior design without anyone deciding that on purpose. The 90s look resists that sameness almost by definition. because it draws from a much wider, messier, more personal set of references, color, pattern, and material choices that don't reduce easily to a single repeatable formula. Choosing this aesthetic now is, in part, a choice to look less like everyone else's feed. That's not nostalgia. That's a reaction to a decade of algorithmic uniformity. Minimalism fatigue, a predictable nostalgia cycle. Cozymaxxing, real craftsmanship, a response to digital life, a reach for individuality. None of that is really about the 90s. It's about everything the last decade left out, and the 90s just happens to be where design is finding it again. Subscribe for more design trend breakdowns.